Hey VC, it's Matt again. Just kind of been making a lot of videos on Sundays, seems like recently. Yeah, I wanted to do a contest, but don't want to do that just yet. I'm still kind of figuring out the details on that one. But I thought I would do a couple of challenges, or I don't know if challenge, maybe question, just to get response videos. So the first one we talked about right now is basically just blatantly stealing something from Paige Martin, who did a contest here recently. If you don't know Paige, she's been on here for a while. She makes quite a few videos, has really good taste in music and interesting things to say about it. So I think everyone here probably knows who she is, but if you don't, definitely check her channel out. She's a Paige, last name Martin, and she's one of the many assets of the VC. Anyway, her contest was to name your favorite decade music wise, and then show 10 to 15 of your favorite albums from that decade. Pretty straightforward. Like I said, this is just going to be a response thing. It's not going to be a contest, but I'm going to, if it's okay, steal that idea from you, Paige, but with a little twist, and that is to name your favorite decade in music and then go through each year of the decade and name your favorite album from that year. So, and I didn't enter Paige's contest because just things going on back then, but no huge surprise if anyone's watched my videos that my favorite decade would be the 60s, not would be, is the 60s. So, for example, I would say my favorite album of 1960 is this album, of 61 is this, 62 this, and on down the road to 1969. So that's basically it. And if you say, well, wait a minute, I'm not sure some things, what year they came out, it's easy enough. You just go to Google, type in records released in 1957 or 1988 or whatever, and it'll bring up a huge list of all sorts of albums released in that given year. So, pretty straightforward contest. The was, as like I said, as a response, there's not really any rules, but the album does have to have been released that year. So, in other words, if you pick, I don't know, the 2000s, say that's when I got into music, and my favorite album of 2000 was some album that came out that year. Say, well, in 201, I discovered the Beatles, and I bought Sgt. Pepper and played it to death that year, and so that's my favorite album of 202. Well, that's not going to work because Sgt. Pepper didn't come out in 202. It came out, 67. So it has to have been released that year. That can be like a various artists thing or a compilation. So if you do the 70s and you get to 73 and you want to say the Beatles' Red album or the Blue album, that's fine because that album, in fact, came out that year, even though the songs were recorded well before 1973. Or 1995, if you wanted to do Anthology 1, that's fine. You know, so that's basically just, it has to be released that year, whether it's brand new music that a current band recorded and released that year, or whether it's a greatest hits album like Neil Young's Decade or Nuggets or something like that that came out in whatever that given year was. The special exception I'm going to do for two members of the VC, if they choose to join into the response, I hope they do. That would be Joe, Mean Mr. Mayo, and Adam Lee. I know Joe's moving, and so he might still be in process of that and unpacking and packing and so forth, and not have time to do this. There's really no deadline because it's not a contest. But so for Joe and Adam Lee, I'm going to make a little special exception because I'm thinking if they do participate, got a good feeling that Joe's going to pick the 60s and that Adam Lee is going to pick the 80s. They might surprise me and pick some other decade, but I'm fairly certain in my conviction there. So I'm going to let Joe and Adam Lee pick two picks for certain years because I'm also fairly certain that Joe's going to pick a lot of Beatles albums and Adam Lee's going to pick a lot of Madonna albums. And, that way we don't just have Joe saying, well, 63 with the Beatles, 64 Hard Day's Night, 65 Rubber Soul, 66, so, and same with Adam Lee, So they can pick their Beatle and or Madonna album for that given year if they in fact pick the 60s and the 80s, but they can also pick another album, and I'd even prefer that they do make a second choice just to get a little variety in there so that it's not just, like I said, 7 Madonna or 7 Beatle albums from the two of them. And obviously they're going to have to, if Adam Lee does the 80s, or if he's does 1980, 1981, and 2, he's going to have to pick someone else anyway because Madonna didn't exist and wasn't invented yet. But I mean, from 83 on, and same with Joe. I mean, there weren't Beatles albums in 1960. So, but so that's it. Just hope to hear some responses of your favorite decade and your favorite album of that decade. And of course, it can be any genre. It doesn't have to be rock and roll. It can be country, soul, rap, heavy metal, classical, whatever you want to, just as long as it was released that year. So I hope some people respond to it. See ya.